I put your name in the front gate of the palace, carving each letter into the polished brass until it gleamed against the morning light. It was a quiet rebellion, a gesture that felt both intimate and daring, for nothing of such personal devotion had ever been allowed to touch those ancient doors. As I traced the curves of your name, I thought of how many stories these gates had witnessed: coronations, parades, farewells to soldiers, yet never anything as tender as this. I wanted the very first threshold of my world to speak of you, to whisper your presence to anyone who dared approach. I stood back to look at the work, the sun catching the metal so that it shone like a secret made visible. Around me, the courtyard stirred with its usual rhythm, guards exchanging quiet words, doves fluttering down to steal crumbs from the cobblestones. But for a moment it all receded, leaving only the pulse of my own heartbeat. I imagined you arriving here, eyes widening as you saw your name gleaming above the entrance, and the thought wrapped around me like a warm cloak. I hoped you would understand what it meant, that I wanted every soul who crossed that gate to know who had been brave enough to leave a mark on my guarded heart. The palace has always been a fortress, its walls a testament to centuries of vigilance. For years I believed it could never bend to anything as gentle as love. Yet this simple act, engraving you into its skin, felt like rewriting its history, threading softness through the stone. Even the guards who pretended not to notice glanced at the letters with something like curiosity, perhaps even envy. I almost laughed at the thought that a single name could do what politics and power never could: remind this place that warmth belongs here, too. As I lingered, I felt the memory of our first meeting rise within me. You were standing in a garden beyond these walls, sunlight tangled in your hair, speaking with a candor I hadn't heard in years. That day, something inside me shifted, a quiet recognition that I had finally met someone who could see the man behind the crown. I had guarded that discovery fiercely, tucking it away like a jewel no one else was allowed to touch. Today, inscribing your name at the palace gate, I felt as though I was setting that jewel in the open air, letting the world know I no longer wished to keep you hidden. There will be those who question this, who will see it as a breach of decorum or a foolish indulgence. But I have learned that a prince's strength is not only in the wars he avoids or the treaties he signs. It is also in the courage to honor what gives his life meaning. To etch your name into the very face of my home is to declare that my heart is not a secret chamber, but a living thing that deserves its place among the banners and the marble. And when the day comes that you walk through that gate, I want you to see not only the walls of a palace, but a promise, one forged in metal and morning light, waiting patiently to be fulfilled. The letters caught the sunlight in a way that made them seem alive, as if the morning itself had decided to bless the secret I dared to leave there. For a heartbeat I simply stood and watched, letting the quiet soak through me. The palace gates have always been a symbol of distance, a statement that what lies inside is reserved for the few who carry the right blood or the right seal. Yet now, with your name gleaming across their surface, they no longer felt like a barrier. They felt like an invitation, not just to you, but to the part of me that has always been too careful to dream aloud. I could hear the distant rhythm of hooves on stone, the murmur of guards at their posts, the muted rustle of banners stirring in the breeze. All of it formed the backdrop to a single truth. Every stroke of metal against metal this morning had been an act of defiance wrapped in devotion. I wanted to leave behind something no council meeting could erase, something untouched by protocol. Perhaps it was reckless, but for the first time in years I allowed myself to believe that the true strength of a ruler is not in the rules he enforces, but in the humanity he refuses to lose. Memories rose like mist from the courtyard stones. I remembered the first time I saw you beyond the palace walls. The way your laughter had scattered a flock of birds, how unafraid you were to look directly into my eyes when others bowed their heads. That moment planted a seed, I didn't dare acknowledge at first, a quiet insistence that there was more to life than duty's iron spine. Carving your name today felt like nurturing that seed, coaxing it into the light even as I knew storms would try to uproot it. I imagined you arriving at these gates one day, unaware of the inscription waiting to greet you. I pictured the way your fingers might brush against the polished brass, tracing the letters as though they were a path leading somewhere safe. I hoped you'd see not just your name, but everything behind it. The mornings I've spent questioning the walls built around my heart. The nights I've lain awake wondering if love could survive in a place designed for restraint. Maybe you'd smile. Maybe you'd scold me for daring such a public gesture. But either way, you'd understand that it wasn't ornament. It was truth etched in metal. The act stirred something larger than romance. It reminded me that every kingdom is more than its thrones and councils. It is a living tapestry of stories, courage and quiet rebellions. By placing your name where heraldry once stood alone, I was weaving another thread into that tapestry, one that spoke of vulnerability rather than conquest. Perhaps that is the legacy I wish to leave, a reign that remembers the heart as fiercely as it remembers law. Even as I stood there, I could sense the questions that would come. Advisors would tilt their heads, ministers would mutter about propriety. My father might even see in it another sign of recklessness. But I have begun to understand that leadership is not about placating every voice in the room. It is about standing still long enough for others to see what anchors you, what gives weight to your promises. This morning, it was your name that gave weight to mine, and I felt no shame in that. When I finally turned away from the gate, the courtyard stretched before me, bathed in a pale gold light that made even the oldest stones seem young again. I felt a strange calm settle over my shoulders, as if the world had acknowledged the gesture and chosen to keep it safe. Whatever storms might gather beyond these walls, this small engraving would remain, a quiet sentinel at the threshold, reminding me that the life I want is not hidden in some faraway horizon, but waiting just beyond the doors I've finally dared to open. The quiet of the courtyard seemed to deepen as I walked away from the gates, each step pulling me further into a tide of reflection. The palace loomed above me, proud and silent, yet the air felt different now, lighter, almost reverent. For years its stones had spoken only of law and lineage, of victories carved into marble and rules etched into parchment. But this morning, because of a single inscription, it felt as though the place itself had discovered a heartbeat. Even the guards, standing as still as statues, looked somehow softened by the sunlight glancing off the letters. As I made my way toward the gardens, memories flickered across my thoughts like banners catching the wind. I remembered the long evenings spent inside council rooms heavy with incense and expectation, where every sentence had to be weighed before it was spoken. I had been taught that a prince's worth was measured by restraint, by the ability to conceal every flicker of longing behind a polished mask. Yet what I felt now, watching the glow of your name from afar, was not a loss of discipline, but a reclamation of something I had been starving for. The freedom to show what truly matters. Beyond the hedges, the fountain's water glittered, as if sprinkled with fragments of the morning sky. I paused there, hearing the steady rush of water over stone, and thought of how easily time can sweep away our boldest acts if we don't root them in meaning. That carving was more than sentiment. It was a declaration that I refused to let the world reduce love to secrecy. Perhaps it will cause whispers, perhaps even outrage. But it will also remind me, and anyone with the courage to look closely, that power without a living heart is only an empty crown. A breeze lifted the scent of roses from the far beds, carrying it across the lawn like a blessing. I let myself breathe it in, feeling the petals' softness echo somewhere in my chest. It struck me then how strange it was that a single gesture could open so many corridors in the soul. That engraving was not only for you, it was for the boy I once was, the one who pressed his palms against these same gates and dreamed of a life beyond obligation. He would have marveled to see how far we have come, and how far we still might go if we are brave enough to keep choosing each other over fear. I found a seat on a stone bench shaded by an ancient olive tree, its gnarled branches casting shifting patterns across the path. From there I could see the gleam of brass where your name rested, a quiet signature stitched into the heart of royal architecture. I wondered if one day, long after we are gone, someone else might notice those letters and feel the warmth they were meant to hold. Perhaps they would never know the story behind them, but they might sense, as I do now, that there was once a prince who dared to honor someone with more than words. The thought of coming storms drifted through my mind, but they no longer felt quite so threatening. The court may chatter, advisors may frown, and tradition may scowl at the audacity of sentiment displayed so openly. Yet I've begun to understand that the foundation of strength isn't built on hiding tenderness. It's built on carrying it through fire and letting it survive. That understanding will steady me when voices grow loud and eyes grow sharp. It will remind me why I must keep the gate unlocked, at least in spirit, for the person whose name shines there. As the morning stretched into a golden haze, I rose from the bench and set my course back toward the palace doors. The halls awaiting me would be filled with the familiar weight of duty, but today their burden seemed less suffocating. Behind me, the gate stood gleaming, a quiet witness to the man I am becoming, someone willing to let his devotion stand tall, even against the oldest stones. And somewhere beyond those doors, in a space not yet shaped by titles or decrees, there waits a future I am finally ready to claim.